You're listening to Bigfoot Society, and I'm Jeremiah Byron. Tonight's account is from a group of 6 seasoned campers, 3 of them trained military, who ventured deep into the rugged heart of Elk State Forest in Pennsylvania. They planned a week-long escape off trail, but what they got was something entirely different. This is the night that Jim stopped believing that Bigfoot was a myth, so stay with us. All right, Bigfoot Society, you've got the privilege of talking to Jim today. Jim is an individual that I was introduced to after seeing a Reddit post that he had left. I believe it was an r/Bigfoot. And he is able to come on the show to share some interesting things that happened when he was out camping in northern Pennsylvania. And welcome to the show, Jim. How's it going, man?
It is going great. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You know, we don't get a lot of northern Pennsylvania, so it is always fun when we get to talk to someone from that state, as there is a lot of activity that goes on out there. But, you know, feel free, Jim, to take us back to what was going on that night when you had some weird things happen out there in northern Pennsylvania.
Alrighty. So me and 5 of my buddies, we were going on a week-long camping trip up in Elk State Forest. And it's north central Pennsylvania. We were, I want to say, northeast of Wharton, which is a little town up that way. It lies right on the edge of Elk County, or Elk State Forest. Anyhow, and like I said, we were going up on a week-long trip, and we were going off trail and just what we had to carry with us. And each of my friends, we had all been going camping together since we were teenagers. We've known each other for years, and about the most reliable kind of people you could have around, honestly, especially in the woods. All very capable people. But we ended up going, found a good spot to park, and we just set off into the woods. We ended up going, I believe it was northwest, into the woods, and we got to our spot where we parked at about noon, because we don't live up that way. We live down in southwestern Pennsylvania, a lot of us. And it was a long drive up there. As you can imagine, it's a big state. Anyway, we got into where we parked our cars at about, like I said, noon, and we had about 4 to 5 hours before dark because it was getting into fall. Leaves hadn't really started to fall heavy yet. It was more still into changing colors and all that, but it was getting to it, so days were getting shorter and all that. Whenever we had set off, we started up this one mountain, and it was fairly rugged and very, very minimal sign of any kind of like human interference. You know, like there wasn't a whole lot of garbage. And like I said, we were going off trail anyway, so we didn't expect to find much anyway. So we had hiked for the better part of four hours or so. When it was just starting to be dusk, we had ended up finding a clearing near the top end of this mountainside and decided to set up camp. So we set up our fires, we set up our hammocks, because tent camping is for suckers, in my own personal opinion. And I will recommend that. If you have never been hammock camping, it is something you absolutely have to try. You get the right hang, it is way better night's sleep than sleeping on the ground.
No, it's great. I used to do that on the Appalachian Trail all the time. Yeah, that's great stuff.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, we had set up our camp in this little clearing. We had made dinner, and night settled in. And as you can imagine, a bunch of mid-20, grown men hanging out in the woods. We're going to be laughing and carrying on, having a good time, And we're sitting around the campfire, carrying on, having a good time. And it's getting in dark, and just as about we were getting ready to go to bed, which I would imagine to be around anywhere between 11 and 1 o'clock in the morning. None of us were really paying attention to the time, but dark, kind of, And I'm sitting in my chair, and something hit me in the back. Nothing hard, nothing crazy. So I stood up, and I'm facing campfire, and all five of us are sitting around it. So I turned around and looked into the woods, and as you know, fire blindness is a very big thing, and I couldn't see very far past the tree line at all, and didn't see nothing. And I pulled up my flashlight, and I carry, whenever we go camping or hiking together, I always make sure I have a really good flashlight, and I'm actually still using the same one to this day. It's about 3,000 lumens, so it'll cut through a little bit of night. And I shined it in the direction of what I thought, and I didn't see anything, no movement, no nothing. And I looked down in the chair, and it was a rock, something, I wouldn't say any bigger than maybe like a $50 size around, nothing crazy big, and it wasn't like it was thrown with any kind of force. It was like more of a toss kind of thing. That's why I was figuring, like, well, whatever threw it or whatever hit me would have been right there, within eye shot, even in the dark, but like I said, I didn't see a thing. And whenever I had stood up and pulled my flashlight up, the rest of my buddies, they all had went silent. And it was kind of like a silent rule between the lot of us that if we're out in the woods together and any one of us, perks up because of something going on, we all just shut up and we all pay attention. Well, after I was satisfied that there was pretty much nothing there for me to see, I go and turn back to the fire, and no sooner do I do that did I see a rock come out of the woods, about the same size as what had hit me, in the complete opposite direction, hitting my buddy that was across the campfire from me. Now, mind you, in this amount of time, there wasn't but maybe 20 seconds, so nothing's going to move outside of the line of sight of all six of us in 20 seconds to get around behind us without making any noise, especially in the dark and with no light. I don't care what it is. It's going to make some kind of a noise. It's going to be seen. And that's when I realized that, well, whatever hit me hasn't moved, and now there's something on the other side of us. So now all six of us are up, and I'm running through my head of, well, what kind of animal can actually throw anything? And there ain't many. And my mind immediately went to, well, there's somebody out here with us. Thinking probably people. But I don't know anyone with enough guts to walk up on six grown men in the middle of the woods at night, especially with, like I said, no light, without announcing themselves. And at that point, I had my 45 on me, 45 ACP, and I pulled it out. And whatever was seeing us would have absolutely noticed me doing that, and they did. And that's when things became, I wouldn't say aggressive, but more than what it was before. They started moving around, circling around us, and they continued throwing stones at us, from off where we couldn't see them. And they were thrown quite a bit harder than they were before, and there was no communication. And like I said, we didn't see any lights out in the woods either. So whatever was doing it out there basically blind. And we had a decent fire going, so it's not like they were close to us to be able to for us not to see it. And at this point, all of us had carried sidearms. All of us had carried guns with us for protection. Because there's elk up there, obviously, hence the name of the forest. But there's also black bear, there's bobcat, there's coyotes, and you never know what an animal's gonna be doing, especially when it's hungry. So we'd always carried those just to keep ourselves safe. And whatever was out there knew full well that every one of us was armed. And this is when I realized that we weren't dealing with people, because anybody that would be out there, whether it be, teenagers playing a prank or even a random bunch of hillbillies, if you want to call, if you want to go that route, they would have said, okay, hey, then joke's over now, and I was, like I said, I didn't hear any of that, but whatever was out there circling around us throughout the night, it was definitely at least as big as a man, because it sounded like a grown man crashing through brush and forest and footsteps. I mean, we could hear footsteps being, stomping through and around. And like I said, throughout the night, most of us, none of us could obviously even consider going to sleep. We ended up staying up until it was getting into dawn. And just before the sun started peeking over the mountains, they had turned and ran off in opposite directions away from us before that lights really started to kick in. And now none of us had any fear of the forest at all. None of us had any fear of, the animals that were out there. It's not like we ever would have had to worry about dealing with a grizzly bear, or a moose. We just don't live in that area. But it was definitely a surreal moment for us. And like I said, this happened on our first night of what was supposed to be a 7-day trip. And we ended up packing our bags and we had left. We left that day, the next day. As soon as it was bright enough for us to pack up our gear, we were out. And then, as me and my one buddy, my Marine buddy that was with us, had finished packing up first, we decided it's bright enough. We knew they ran off. We're going to go see if we can figure out what was going on. And we walked off into the tree line, probably 15, 20 yards into the tree line, and we could see where they were circling around us. All the brush was, broken out into a path. All the leaf litter was beaten down, and I had ended up coming across a print that looked human, if you were barefoot, but it had a distinct lack of a foot arch. And I mean, I don't claim to be any, master tracker or anything like that, but I know what a human footprint looks like in the mud or in the sand. Whenever you look at it, you can tell which foot it is pretty simply by the toes and, again, by the arch, because there's a hollow spot in that footprint. And this one didn't have it. It looked more, flat-footed. And it was no bigger than mine. Like if I would have taken my boot off and stepped there in that same mud, it wasn't any longer than mine. It was a little bit wider, but the impression that it made was a lot deeper, which, pretty simply put, that just goes to tell you that whatever was out there and made that print was a lot heavier than I was. Now, at the time, I was between 180 and 190 pounds. So whatever had made that print had to be at least 250, if not more. But it had the same footprint, length that I had. And I guess I should put in for reference that I wear a size 11. So I have a fairly large foot. But, it was after we had found that, we had regrouped with the rest of our buddies. And like I said, we had finished packing up and we went straight back to our cars and we had left. We weren't staying there another night.
That is some really interesting stuff that happened to you guys, Jim, and how far out would you approximate mile wise you were?
Well, from where we had left to where we had ended up, I would say every bit of between 4 to 5 miles.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't trying to set the world on fire, or make any land speed records there. We were taking our time, and it was rough terrain. But I have, every one of us were in fairly good shape. I mean, 3 of us were military. Not myself, but 3 of us were military that were there. So we were all in pretty good shape. And I would imagine that we made it at least 4 miles, if not 5.
Gotcha. Did you notice anything weird around the spot where you were camping when it comes to like trees being like tree arches or trees broken or maybe X marks, anything weird like that?
I mean, I didn't notice it, but I mean, at the time I wasn't really looking for it either on our way in,
Mm-hmm.
because I mean, I'm going to be upfront and tell you, I mean, I wasn't a believer in Bigfoot until that happened, because that was the only thing that I could logically think of that could potentially have done that to us, and actually coming back to the Reddit post, I had a couple of comments on there, and the one guy had asked me, it's like that if I thought that they could be potentially juvenile, especially because speaking about the fact of finding that footprint being close to the size of mine, and it would make sense, especially if you take into account how sensational some of these sightings can be with 8 and 9 foot monsters out there in the woods. Something that big's not going to be afraid of a human, but if it's young, it's going to be smaller, and they could have been, they could have been closer to our size.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is well, a lot of witnesses will say the way that you were getting messed with, a lot of people will say, well, that kind of sounds like, well, maybe it was a juvenile type thing. And that is kind of conjecture and, guessing, but a lot of people do bring that up. And, who knows what they were trying to do when they were, trying to hit you in the back. Were they trying to get your attention or just mess with you? We don't know. But were there any sounds around in the forest during that time?
There were no other animal sounds.
Okay.
Like there wasn't any crickets, there wasn't owls, there wasn't bats. We didn't even hear any coyotes, which I've been up to Elk Forest before. I would go up there trout fishing, more towards Wharton, but we would go trout fishing up there all the time. And at night, you would hear coyotes all day, all night long. They're just so plentiful up there. We didn't hear not a one.
Okay.
And
yeah.
aside from, crashing through bushes and all that as they were circling around us, I couldn't really tell if they were making any kind of a noise or a communication. They were being so loud crashing around through the woods that I couldn't tell you if they were.
Gotcha. Were there any weird smells around that time that you noticed?
Not really. On the way, like I said, it was getting into fall. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you have that smell of, damp forest and the decay of like leaves and all that, that like roll, like it's the best way to put it on, like dirty smell. Like it smells like dirt, you know what I mean? Like whenever those leaves get real wet that are just laying around. But like in the actual event of it, not really. I mean, we had a campfire going, but I mean, you also got to understand this happened coming up on 7 years ago when this had happened to me. But no, I mean, not to my recollection, I wouldn't say that there was any kind of out of place smells. I'll put it that way.
Absolutely.
You know,
when you During the time around the campfire that night, or I guess, through the night, did anyone in the group have any weird physical things happen to them that they weren't able to explain?
No.
Okay.
No, we were all pretty much fine. I mean, aside from a few bruises from some of the rocks that were thrown a little bit harder than they were originally, we were all completely physically fine on the way back out. And during that, more broken pride kind of thing than anything else. Because I mean, like I said, there were 6 grown men out there, and we've all been in the woods at least 10 years, each of us. And here we are running away.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and you said a few of those individuals had a military background as well.
Yes, one of them was Air Force, and 2 of them were actively still Marine Corps.
Wow, that is very, very interesting. After you guys, so you left the next day, and you went to your different homes. Did anyone have anything out of the ordinary happen? Anything unexplained or weird happen after that?
Not that they had told me.
Mm-hmm.
We have talked about the situation before because we still go camping together today.
Okay.
To this day. We go every year at least a few times together. Sometimes we go with just the guys, and I mean, most of us have kids now, and we at least make it a point to go together at least one time every year with our kids. We don't go back up to Elk Forest. We usually go to Allegheny National Forest now, up past East Hickory. That's about the same distance time-wise from where we live. Like I said, we live down near Pittsburgh, but it's in a different section of the state.
That's interesting because, Allegheny National Forest is definitely known for a lot of Bigfoot activity. That's where a lot of researchers will go to check things out. But nothing happened during your time in that area?
Well, nothing that I would say that was out of the ordinary. I mean, we've come across black bears before. We've had coyotes come into camp in the middle of the night and stuff like that, but nothing that I wouldn't say that wouldn't be expected to be seen. You know what I mean? Like,
Gotcha.
actually, wildlife that you would expect to see there.
Mm-hmm. How did this affect you personally after you had this happen that night?
Well, so like I said, I wasn't a Bigfoot believer beforehand. You know what I mean? Wasn't even a thought that had crossed my mind. Like, yeah, it's a cool story, but I mean, it's not, something I think is real because I hadn't seen it or I hadn't experienced anything like that, And afterward, I mean, I kind of leaned into it pretty heavy about, wanting to learn more about it and hearing, firsthand accounts of what it was like to see if mine was out of the ordinary in any way. But I mean, it hasn't stopped me from going hunting. It hasn't stopped me from, going camping. I tend to stick a little bit closer to the campsites nowadays, though. I am getting older. I'm 31. I'll be 32 this year. But I don't think that it has affected me so much because I've been back up to Elk Forest before, since then. And I have camped up there since then. But that particular experience, that was kind of like one of those instincts, like, I'm not welcome here, I'm going to leave kind of thing.
So when you went back to Elk State Forest, did you go to the same spot again, or was it a different campsite that you were staying in?
No, we had not gone back to that same campsite, no.
Okay.
And like I said, we were off trail. It'd be hard to find her again. I'm sure we could if we absolutely had to. But we had just picked a direction from where we had parked and we had went. And it's pretty rugged terrain up there. And, I mean, again, 7 years ago could change the layout a lot between now and then. And I probably could find the general area of where we were at. But I've never been back there personally, and I've never gone that deep back into those woods ever again.
Absolutely. Do you, when you're in that area, do you ever go out by yourself or are you usually in a group?
I've been out there as the only adult. I've taken my daughter fishing up there before, uh, right along East Fork Road, and there's a creek that runs along East Fork Road. It's a great spot for trout fishing, and I'm sure there's going to be plenty of people that are going to be upset that I'm giving that out. Uh, but I've taken my daughter up there uh, to go fishing before. I've camped up there a couple of times with me or, with a couple of my buddies before, but I've never once camped there by myself before, and I don't plan on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I might be a little cautious to do that as well, going off of what you guys experienced. So after you got home, was this a thing where you had shared what happened right away with the rest of your family, or did you hold on to it for a while to kind of work things through in your head?
Well, I mean, I had, like, I had told my wife, because she was wondering why I was home 6 days early.
Right.
I had told her why, and she pretty much laughed at me, which I expected. And the only other person that I told in any expedience, and I think about a week or two later, I had told my father about it, and he had never. Now, he's never been in that particular forest before, to my knowledge. He may have at some point in his life, but I had never been up there with him. But he kind of brushed it off, and he had told me that he's one of them people that's I've spent so much time in the woods I would have seen something by now and never have kind of guys. It's pretty much how he answered that. And I mean, I would assume that's why I was the way I was about it too, because I'm not going to believe it till I experience it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Have you ever done any research to see if there's been similar experiences that have happened in that state forest?
Never in particular to that, but just going based off of the way that, because I have, and like you said, when we were talking about Allegheny National, we were talking about how there's plenty of sightings up there, and the amount of sightings that are in PA and all that, it wouldn't surprise me if there have been more sightings or experiences like I had up there. But I never did any particular research in that specific area afterward. But I have definitely done research on sightings and experiences here in PA since then.
Gotcha. And especially you said you're from Southwest Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah, I live north of Pittsburgh.
Okay, north of Pittsburgh. I mean, you're aware that even down there, I guess more, south of Pittsburgh, there's some weird stuff that happens down in that area as well.
Oh, absolutely. You get down into Washington County and even lower into places like Beaver and everything else down near West Virginia. I would imagine that, yeah, there would be a bunch, because there's a lot of unclaimed, untouched forest out down there. A lot of old growth forests where pretty much anything you could imagine would live, I'm sure. But, what am I going to try to say here? It's gone. I've lost it.
It sounds like it's a thing where you're interested in the subject, but you are maybe not going out and actively seeking it in the woods.
No, I would actually prefer to not have another experience like that, but I'm not going to let it control my life if it does happen.
Okay. Gotcha. Do you think that's the same way your buddies are feeling about that as well, or did it make any of them not go in the woods again after that?
No, every one of it, that whole group, that group of six of us, like I said, we regularly go camping together.
Okay. Gotcha.
We still do it to this day. It hasn't deterred us from going hunting or camping or fishing or anything like that, at all. But there are certain places we just We will not go. And I'm sure, like I said, like we go to Allegheny National Forest mostly now. And until I'm given a reason not to, I'm going to continue going.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's a really, really weird situation. I think the weirdest thing is that it definitely was not anyone messing with you guys, because you were, 5-6 miles off the trail, just in the woods. No one was out there messing with you. There are no lights. That's just weird.
Right. Yeah. Plus, like I said, I don't know any man that's going to be able to keep his cool under the pressure of knowing that there's 6 guys just within, 20, 30 yards of you that have firearms. Every one of us were armed, I don't know anybody that's not going to be like, hey, sorry, I was just messing with you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anybody that wouldn't make themselves known at that point.
Is there anything that you would have done differently that night if you could go back and do things over?
Honestly, not really. I think that we made a fairly good decision because we had all stayed together, and none of us had strayed away at any point. But I don't know if that was out of like some kind of us being smart, or if it was just sheer instinct of the whole strength in numbers kind of thing.
Absolutely.
But, I don't think that I would have personally done anything different. I can't speak for the way my friends may have acted, because you never know what a Marine will do whenever he gets pissy. But, I think that we were all smart enough to be like, yeah, it's probably just best to let them stay over there, let us stay here where we can see. Because if, like I said before, that they had walked up on us, and now, granted, whenever they had come up on us, we were carrying on, having a good time.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't being quiet. So they could have very well come up on us being just as loud as they were whenever they had, whenever we had all stood up and they had started crashing through the brush and everything. We wouldn't have heard them. But they walked up on us with no lights because we would have seen them. And you said you were a hiker on the Appalachian Trail before. You know how dark it gets out in the woods and in the mountains at night.
Oh yeah,
it's a different kind of dark. You can't see your hand in front of your face. You're not making it through as thick of woods as we were in, with the rough terrain as we were in, without a light, without falling on your face at least a dozen times.
Absolutely.
It's just not going to happen.
I know that you said this happened, about 6-7 years ago?
Coming up on 7 years this fall.
Do you happen to remember what you guys had for supper that night at the campsite?
Ooh, that's a great question. I would imagine, I know I had made coffee, because I know what my friends are. I had made myself instant coffee because I was not going to be able to stay up with the rest of them without it. I want to say that we probably had made burgers. We usually eat pretty good on our first night when we go out for multiple nights.
Right.
But, and I want to say probably potatoes is usually our first night thing. It's almost a ritual.
Yeah, gotcha. That's pretty solid. I always check for certain patterns. A pattern I've noticed is that a lot of people will say they were cooking bacon, or it's usually bacon. Yeah, it's usually bacon. Which is weird. But it smells delicious. So, I can't blame them, right? But
there's a different reason for that. So not to go down a dark path here, but the serial killers that were cannibals, They say that human flesh tastes like bacon, like pork. So it's a little unsettling. Thanks.
That's weird. I mean, just had
Like I
cannibals
said,
come
I
up
didn't
and
want to go
another
down that
thing.
dark path. I
Yeah.
had to say something about it.
Hey, well, I mean, I had no idea, but it's good to know, I guess.
Yeah.
It's wild stuff. Yeah, if you're down in I don't know how far away this would be from it. If you're wanting to go to an area that has Bigfoot activity, it doesn't really sound like you care either way. But Forbes State Forest down there, I don't know if you've heard of that area, or the Laurel Ridge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That area is extremely active, so might be a place you might not want to go to actually, but that place is
like
pretty
I said,
wild.
I mean, I'm not one to go out looking for
Mm-hmm.
trouble. I did that more than enough when I was a teenager, and I've grown smart enough not to want to do that. But I'm not, like I said, I'm still not scared to go into the woods and go hunting and camping and all that. And until, like I said, Allegheny National Forest, we go there all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and apparently it's a pretty big hotspot for Bigfoot activity.
It is, yeah.
And I will continue to go there until I find a reason not to. You know, I mean, it doesn't bother me going out into the woods and going to have a good time. And I will, no matter where it's at, until I get given that reason to stay away from it.
Just a few more questions, just in case you remember some specific details about the footprints that you saw.
Mm-hmm.
Were you able to see toes in those footprints, toe indentations?
I could see the first four toes coming from the inside to the outside very clearly. Pinky toe, generally, not really.
Uh-huh.
I couldn't see.
Okay.
Like I said before, it had a distinct lack of an arch, like a human footprint would.
Yeah, right.
It was very, very flat-footed, but it had the general idea of the same shape, you know, tapered from the back, tapered at the back. There was a distinction between, there was a clear, how should I explain this? There was clear distinction between the main pad of the foot and the toes.
Right.
There was a distance there, you know what I mean, where it had not been pressed in so far. You could tell. And like I said, it was pressed in deep, a lot deeper than I would have been able to, unless maybe I jumped into that and jumped down into it to, So I would have, like I said, I would have assumed that whatever had made that print was a fair bit heavier than myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And was it just one print that you had seen, or were there multiple prints?
We did find a couple that were fairly good. There was a couple that were more partial than anything, but most of the ground was covered in dead leaves and all that, where it was rocky. So being able to find any was pretty much a miracle at that point. There was just a couple of spots where the ground was soft enough or there was mud that we were actually able to find anything.
That makes sense. If you were able to follow the tracks for a while, what did the path of the tracks look like?
So the ring that they had ran around us for at least a couple of hours, 3-4 hours before daylight started to come, it was wider than your average person, and I mean, with them circling there for as long as they did, that's not really surprising, but it was wide enough to where I could stand broad, and my buddy that was on that ring with us, he could stand next to me without either of us touching, either side of that brush that they had broken down. Now, I don't mean both of us shoulder to shoulder. If he would have been facing me and I would have been standing broad, we would have been able to fit completely fine. So about a man and a half wide.
Gotcha. And how, let's say you're looking at one track and then you're looking at the track next in line and then one next in line. How far apart were the tracks usually?
Oh, that would be an estimate. I don't know. Like I said, there weren't very many tracks that, and especially not in succession, that we could see.
Gotcha.
But if I had to guess, I mean, just going based on, human proportions, I wouldn't say that their stride would have been much more than us. But again, they had circled and circled and circled us for hours, so they would have been stepping over each one multiple times. Aside from the ones that were closer, where they had probably stopped to throw something at us. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be interesting to see, once I put this up, to see if there's other people that have had things happen in the same area. That's usually how it works with these. There'll be people that reach out and they'll say, "Oh yeah, I've been in Elk State Forest. Stuff has happened." So that will be interesting. Do you ever have any desire to have a visual sighting of one, or really it's just you're kind of going along your business and still trying to go out and camp in the woods?
I would have loved to have been able to actually have seen something. That way, at least I knew I could put a face to whatever it was. But I didn't get that opportunity. But like I said, I'm not going to go out there and actively, look for that. If it happens, it happens, kind of thing.
Absolutely, yeah. It's something where I haven't even had that happen myself yet, and I'm not sure. Well, I mean, I've talked to plenty of people where they have that happen and it affects them, but to have that happen to yourself is a different story. It's a totally different story. But Jim, I just want to say thank you for coming on the show to share what you and your buddies experienced that night out in the Elk State Forest. It's a new area for us to look into for Pennsylvania, and I appreciate you coming on. I do want to make sure that you were able to share everything that you had come on the show to share tonight.
Yeah, pretty much. Without actually seeing anything, there's not really much more to put into it. It was just, explaining the experience, because that's essentially all it was. None of us had seen anything, and none of my friends had told me since then that they had heard anything or had seen anything. And I would just assume that, like myself, we didn't see it. We had not seen anything, but there was undoubtedly something out there with us.
Oh, no doubt about it. And I would say if anything ever happens when you guys are out in the Allegheny National Forest, definitely feel free to reach out. There's been sightings in that area. There have been people that have been affected by infrasound in that area. So there's a lot of interesting reports that happen over the years.
I'll have to look into it. But yeah, no, absolutely. If I ever have another experience, or even if one of my friends do, I'll have them reach out to you. But yeah, no, if anything happens to me, I will make sure I let you know.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for chatting tonight, Jim. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Just wanted to take a minute to say thank you for listening to this episode of the Bigfoot Society podcast. Jim's encounter is the kind that lingers not because of what he saw, but because of what he couldn't see. The silence, the rocks, the circling, the moment that he realized that something was watching and it didn't care if he was armed or not. So huge thanks to Jim for coming on and sharing such a raw, personal story. These moments remind us why we listen and why some trails are better left untrodden. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to us on YouTube and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure you're following the show and leave a review if you can. It helps more people discover these accounts. And if you've had a Bigfoot encounter, especially in Pennsylvania, around Elk State Forest, Wharton, or the Allegheny Forest, I'd love to hear from you. So please email me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. And one last thing, don't forget Sasquatch Summerfest is happening July 11th through the 12th in Oak Ridge, Oregon. Bigfoot Society listeners can get a 2-day pass with the price of a 1-day admission with code BFS at checkout. You can get your tickets now over at www.sasquatchsummerfest.com. Thank you again for being part of the Bigfoot Society. Until next time, trust your gut, stay curious, and keep your eyes on the tree line. And see you in the woods.